The metal corridors of the EDF horizon hummed with the usual sounds of a working starship. Commander Jake Morrison walked through these halls with steady steps, his face showing no emotion. He had made his decision 3 days ago, and nothing would change his mind now. His crew tried to talk him out of it, but Jake knew what he had to do. The contested zones were dangerous parts of space where no government had control. Different alien species came here to settle their arguments through combat. It was brutal and ancient, but the Galactic Council allowed it because it kept wars from breaking out. Today, Jake would step into one of these arenas, and everyone knew he probably would not walk out alive. Lieutenant Amy Phillips caught up with him near the armory. She was his second in command and had served with him for 5 years. Her face showed worry and frustration. "Commander, please reconsider this," Amy said, keeping her voice low so others would not hear. "We have already proven that humans can fight. We have won battles. We have earned respect. You do not need to throw your life away." Jake stopped and looked at her. His eyes were tired, older than his 42 years. "This is not about proving we can fight, Amy. This is about justice." "Anyone. Justice?" Amy's voice rose slightly. "This is suicide. Krasthor has killed 47 opponents. 47, Jake. He has never lost. Not once. He has fought warriors from 12 different species, each one trained from birth to kill. What makes you think you can survive?" Jake started walking again, and Amy followed. "I do not think I will survive," he said quietly. "But someone has to stand up and demand answers for what happened at Epsilon Prime." 3 months had passed since the Vareth Empire destroyed the human colony on Epsilon Prime. 2,000 people died that day. The Varath claimed it was a legitimate military target, that the colony was being used to stage attacks. It was a lie, but the Galactic Council did nothing. They said there was not enough evidence. They said starting a war over one colony would cost millions more lives. Jake understood their reasoning. He even agreed with it on some level. But understanding did not take away the pain. It did not bring back the people who died. It did not bring back Lisa, his wife of 15 years. It did not bring back their daughter, Emma, who was only 9 years old. They reached the armory, and Jake began selecting his equipment. The rules of arena combat were strict. No energy weapons, no advanced armor, only basic protective gear and simple weapons. It was meant to test the warrior, not their technology. "The Council will not change their minds just because you die in an arena," Amy said, trying a different approach. "They will call you a hero, give you medals, and then move on. Nothing will change." Jake picked up a combat knife and tested its weight. "Maybe you are right. Maybe nothing will change. But at least I will have tried. At least I will have shown them that humans do not just accept injustice quietly." Amy was silent for a moment. Then she said something that made Jake pause. "Lisa would not want this. She would want you to live, to keep fighting in a way that matters." Jake's hand tightened on the knife handle. "Lisa is dead, Amy. Emma is dead. Everyone I loved is gone. This is the only way I know how to honor them now." He finished gathering his equipment and turned to face his officer. "You have command of the horizon. If I do not come back, take the crew home. Tell them I was proud to serve with them." Amy's eyes were wet, but she stood at attention and saluted. "Good luck, Commander." Jake returned the salute and left the armory. He made his way to the shuttle bay, where a small transport waited to take him down to the arena. The pilot, a young man named Kevin, barely looked old enough to be in the military. He nodded respectfully as Jake entered. The flight to the surface was quiet. Jake looked out the window at the planet below. It was called Throne World, though nobody knew who originally named it. The planet had no permanent settlements, just the massive arena and the facilities around it. Beings from all over the galaxy came here to watch the fights. As they descended, Jake could see the arena growing larger. It was enormous. built to hold over 100,000 spectators. The architecture was strange, a mix of styles from dozens of different species. Some parts looked like human buildings. Others were clearly alien in design. The shuttle landed on a platform reserved for challengers. Jake stepped out and was immediately met by an official. A tall alien, with blue skin and 4 arms. The being spoke in perfect standard, the common language used across the galaxy. Commander Jake Morrison of Earth. You are registered for combat against Kraz Thor of the Verath Empire. Do you understand the rules? Repless. I do, Jake replied. The combat will continue until one fighter surrenders, becomes unable to fight, or dies. There will be no outside interference. Medical teams will only enter after the combat is concluded. Do you accept these terms? I accept. The official made a gesture with 2 of his hands, and guards appeared to escort Jake to the holding area beneath the arena. The corridors here were old, stained with the blood of countless fighters. Jake could hear the roar of the crowd above, eager for violence and entertainment. His holding cell was small and bare. A bench, a water dispenser, and a view screen showing information about his opponent. Jake sat down and began to read. Even though he had already memorized every detail, Kraz Thor was 8 feet tall and covered in scales that could stop most conventional weapons. He was incredibly strong, incredibly fast, and trained since childhood in the Verath warrior traditions. The Verath were a species built for war. Their culture valued strength and combat ability above all else. The view screen showed recordings of Kraz Thor's previous fights. Jake watched as the massive warrior destroyed opponent after opponent. Some fights lasted only seconds. Others went on for several minutes, but the result was always the same. Kraz Thor won, and his opponents either limped away broken or were carried out dead. Jake should have been afraid. Any reasonable person would be terrified. But Jake felt nothing except a cold determination. He had come here to make a statement, to show the galaxy that humans would not be ignored, to demand justice for the people of Epsilon Prime, even if it cost him everything. The roar of the crowd hit Jake like a physical force as he stepped into the arena. The noise was deafening, a mix of sounds from hundreds of different species all shouting at once. Some cheered, some booed, and some made sounds that human ears could barely process. The arena itself was massive, easily 300 feet across, with walls that rose 50 feet high before the first row of seats began. The floor was covered in sand, dark red in color, stained from years of blood. Above, the artificial sun blazed down, making the arena floor hot and bright. Jake walked toward the center, his boots leaving footprints in the sand. He could feel thousands of eyes watching him, judging him, measuring him. Then Kraz Thor entered from the opposite side, and the crowd went wild. The Verath warrior was even more impressive in person than in the recordings. 8 feet of pure muscle, covered in deep green scales that looked like armor. His arms were thick as tree trunks, and his hands ended in claws that could easily tear through metal. His face was reptilian, with golden eyes that seemed to glow in the harsh light. He wore only minimal clothing, a simple wrap around his waist, because his natural scales provided better protection than any armor humans could make. Kraz Thor moved with confidence, the walk of someone who had never known defeat. The crowd chanted his name in various languages, and he raised one massive arm in acknowledgement. Then his eyes found Jake, and the human felt the weight of that stare. They met in the center of the arena. Standing next to Kraz Thor, Jake felt small. He was 6 feet tall and in excellent physical condition. But next to this alien warrior, he looked like a child. The size difference was obvious to everyone watching, and Jake heard laughter from some sections of the crowd. The same blue-skinned official from before stood between them, raising all 4 arms for silence. The crowd noise died down to a low murmur. Warriors of the arena, you have agreed to settle your dispute through honorable combat. The rules are ancient and simple. Fight until one can no longer continue. No weapons beyond what you carry. No assistance from outside. Victory goes to the one left standing. Do you both understand? Do you both understand? I understand, Jake said clearly. Krozthor nodded. I understand. His voice was deep and rumbling, like thunder. The official stepped back, leaving the two fighters facing each other. Krozthor looked down at Jake, with an expression that might have been respect or pity. It was hard to tell, with Vareth faces. You are brave, human, Krozthor said in Standard. I have studied your species. You are fragile, weak. Yet you stand before me, knowing you will die. This takes courage. He paused. I will make your death swift. This is the honor I give you. Jake met those golden eyes without flinching. You are welcome to try. For just a moment, something flickered in Krozthor's expression. Surprise. Maybe. Then, the bell rang, and the fight began. Krozthor moved faster than Jake expected. For a creature so large, the speed was shocking. His first strike came like lightning. A massive fist aimed directly at Jake's head. If it had connected, the fight would have ended right there. But Jake had watched the recordings dozens of times. He had studied Krozthor's patterns, his preferences, his techniques. Jake dropped and rolled to the left, feeling the wind from the blow pass over his head. The crowd gasped. It was not much, just avoiding a single strike, but it was more than many of Krozthor's opponents managed. The Vareth warrior turned, faster than something his size should be able to turn, and swung again. Jake ducked under this strike and moved in close, too close for those long arms to be effective. He drove his knee into Krozthor's midsection, right where the scales seemed thinner. The impact jarred Jake's leg, but he saw the warrior grunt slightly. Krozthor grabbed for him, and Jake barely escaped, diving away and rolling back to his feet. They circled each other now, both reassessing. The crowd was louder now, more interested. This was not going as they expected. You are fast, Krozthor acknowledged. But speed will not save you forever. He attacked again, a combination of strikes that forced Jake backward. Each blow came within inches of connecting, and Jake knew that even one hit would probably break bones. He focused on defense, on survival, using every trick he had learned in 20 years of military service. But Krozthor was not just strong and fast. He was skilled. Trained from childhood in combat. With decades of experience, he began to adapt to Jake's movements, cutting off escape routes, forcing the human into corners. Jake took a glancing blow to his shoulder that spun him around and nearly knocked him down. Pain exploded through his arm, but he kept moving. Stop moving, and you die, he told himself. Keep moving, and maybe you live another minute. The fight became a brutal dance. Krozthor pressed his advantages of strength and reach, trying to corner Jake and finish him. Jake used everything around him. The terrain, the angles, anything to stay alive. He could not match the Vareth in power, so he had to be smarter. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The crowd was going crazy now. Krozthor's fights usually lasted less than 5 minutes. No one lasted this long against him. Jake was bleeding from several cuts, his body bruising, but he was still standing. Still fighting. Then Jake saw his opening. Krozthor raised his arm for a devastating overhead strike, and for just a second, his midsection was exposed. Jake moved in, faster than he had moved all fight, and drove his combat knife into the small gap between scales just below the ribs. The blade sank in 3 inches before Krozthor's hand closed around Jake's wrist and tore him away. The knife stayed in the wound, and dark blood began to flow. The entire arena went silent. For the first time in years, Krozthor was bleeding. Really bleeding, not just scratched or bruised. The wound was not fatal, but it was real, visible, undeniable. Jake landed hard. his wrist likely broken from Thor's grip. But he forced himself to stand, to face the warrior despite the pain. He would not die on his knees. Thor looked down at the knife in his side. He grabbed it and pulled it out without even flinching. Blood flowed more freely now, staining the sand beneath his feet. He looked at the knife, then at Jake, then threw the weapon aside. "Impressive," the Varath said, and now his voice held genuine respect. "You are the first to wound me in combat in over 10 years. Jake said nothing. He could barely breathe. His wrist was definitely broken, his shoulder might be dislocated, and he had cuts all over his body. But he had done it. He had drawn first blood against the undefeated champion. The crowd found their voices again, roaring louder than before. Some cheered for Jake, amazed at what they had witnessed. Others chanted for Thor to finish it. The two fighters circled each other in the blood-stained sand. Both were wounded now. Both were breathing hard. The crowd watched in complete silence, sensing that something unusual was happening. This was not like other fights. This was something different. Thor pressed one hand against his wounded side, but his eyes never left Jake. The human commander stood, with his broken wrist held against his chest, trying to ignore the pain. Sweat and blood covered his face, but his eyes remained focused. "Why do you fight without fear?" Thor asked suddenly. The question echoed across the arena through the amplifiers. "I have killed many warriors. All of them showed fear at some point. Some hid it well, but it was there. You have no fear." "I do not understand this." Jake took a careful breath before answering. Speaking would give Thor information about how tired he was. But the warrior had asked a direct question. In some strange way, Jake felt he owed an honest answer. "I have already lost everything that mattered," Jake said, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "My wife, Lisa, and my daughter, Emma. They were on Epsilon Prime. Your people destroyed them. Killed them, along with 2,000 others. Fear is something you feel when you have something left to lose." The words fell like stones into water, creating ripples that spread through the crowd. Species that understood standard, translated for those who did not. Faces that could show emotion reflected shock, understanding, and sometimes sympathy. Even in a galaxy filled with war, personal loss was something everyone could understand. Thor stood very still. His golden eyes studied Jake with new intensity. "You seek revenge," he said finally. "This, I understand. Revenge is honorable among my people." "Not revenge," Jake corrected. "Justice. Your empire said Epsilon Prime was a military target. It was a lie. There were families there. Children. Scientists and farmers and teachers. They were not soldiers. The Galactic Council did nothing. So I came here to make you listen." Something changed in Thor's posture. The aggressive stance softened slightly. "You believe I ordered the attack on your colony?" Tumeng. Tumeng. You are Varath. You are their champion. Their weapon," Jake said. Thor was silent for several long seconds. The crowd waited, confused by the conversation. This was supposed to be a fight, not a discussion. But no one dared interrupt. "I am a warrior, not a butcher of civilians," Thor said, and there was something like anger in his voice. "I did not order the attack on Epsilon Prime. I argued against it in the War Council. I said it was dishonorable to target non-combatants. But I am a soldier. I follow orders, even when I disagree with them." Jake stared at the massive warrior. Was this a trick? Some kind of psychological warfare? But Thor's voice carried conviction. Whatever else he might be, the Varath did not sound like he was lying. "Then why are you here?" Jake asked. "Why fight for an empire that does dishonorable things?" "Because I believe the empire can be better," Thor replied. "Because walking away solves nothing. Because my people need warriors who remember what honor means, not just strength. He paused. You understand this. You are here for the same reason. You fight not because you want to, but because you believe you must. The two warriors looked at each other across the sand, and something passed between them. Understanding. Recognition. They were not so different, despite coming from different worlds. This conversation is interesting, Krozthor said. But we are in the arena. The combat must continue. The rules demand it, Jake nodded. I know. Krozthor moved forward, but now his approach was different. He was not trying to simply crush Jake anymore. He was testing the human, pushing him to see what he could do. Each strike was powerful, but not wild. Each movement was calculated. Jake defended as best he could, with one useless arm. He dodged when possible, blocked when necessary, and looked for any opening to counterattack. His body was failing. He could feel his strength draining away, but he refused to quit. They exchanged blows for another 10 minutes. Jake managed to land several good hits, targeting the same wound he had made earlier. Krozthor's movements became slightly slower as blood loss began to affect him, but the Varath was still far stronger than Jake. A massive backhand caught Jake across the chest and sent him flying. He hit the sand hard and rolled several times before stopping. His vision blurred. His ribs screamed in pain. He tried to stand, but his legs would not cooperate. The crowd roared, thinking it was over. Krozthor walked toward the fallen human, breathing heavily. The wound in his side was still bleeding, though slower now. He looked down at Jake with an expression the human could not read. You should stay down, Krozthor said quietly. You have fought with honor. No one would think less of you for surrendering now. Jake pushed himself up on one elbow. Then, with tremendous effort, he got to his knees. Blood dripped from his mouth onto the sand. Not done yet, he managed to say. Krozthor tilted his head. Why? You cannot win. Your body is broken. Continuing will only bring you more pain before the inevitable end. Oh, because giving up means they died for nothing, Jake said, forcing himself to stand. His legs shook, barely supporting his weight. Because, if I quit, the galaxy learns that humans can be beaten, that we can be ignored, that we do not matter. He took a step forward, nearly falling but catching himself. Because my daughter needs to know. Her father never stopped fighting, even if she is not here to see it. Something remarkable happened then. Krozthor, the undefeated champion, the warrior who had killed 47 opponents, bowed his head slightly in respect. You have the heart of a true warrior, the Varath said. I honor your strength. Then he moved in for what should have been the final strike. Jake tried to dodge, but his body would not respond fast enough. Krozthor's fist came toward his head in a blow that would end the fight. But Jake did something desperate. Instead of trying to avoid the strike, he moved into it, accepting the hit to his shoulder instead of his head. The impact shattered his collarbone, but it got him inside Krozthor's guard. With his one working arm, using the last of his strength, Jake drove his fingers into the Varath's throat. It was not a killing blow, but it was effective. Krozthor stumbled back, gasping for air. Jake fell to his knees, unable to stand anymore. Both fighters were down, both struggling to breathe, both pushed beyond their limits. The crowd was screaming, but Jake barely heard them. His vision was fading. He tried to stand one more time, but his body finally gave up. He collapsed, face first into the sand. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was Krozthor's voice, also weak and strained. Well fought, human. Well fought. Jake woke slowly, his mind climbing up from darkness like a swimmer rising to the surface. Pain greeted him first, a dull ache that seemed to cover his entire body. Then came awareness of sounds, the steady beep of medical equipment, the hum of advanced technology working to heal him. He opened his eyes and found himself in a recovery chamber filled with blue healing light. The chamber was transparent, allowing him to see out into a medical facility that was clearly designed for multiple species. Strange machines lined the walls, and medical staff of various alien races moved between patients. Then, Jake noticed something unexpected. In the recovery chamber next to his, separated by just a few feet of space, was Kraz, Thor. The massive Varath warrior was also surrounded by blue healing light. His scaled body, covered in bandages and medical sensors. His eyes were closed, but the steady rise and fall of his chest showed he was alive. A medical drone noticed Jake was awake and floated closer. It spoke in standard, through a translator. "Commander Morrison, please remain still. Your injuries are extensive. Broken collarbone, dislocated shoulder, fractured wrist, 3 cracked ribs, and significant, soft tissue damage. The healing technology will repair most of the damage within 5 days, but you must not move unnecessarily." Jake tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The drone extended an arm with a water tube, and Jake drank gratefully. After a moment, he managed to ask, "Kraz Thor?" Warrior Kraz Thor is also in recovery. Internal bleeding, damaged throat cartilage, and significant blood loss. His condition is stable. You both collapsed simultaneously, which according to arena law, constitutes a draw. The drone paused. You are the first being to achieve this result against Kraz Thor in over 15 years of combat. Jake closed his eyes, processing this information. A draw. Not a win, but not a loss either. He had survived. Against all odds, he had stood against the galaxy's fiercest warrior and lived. Time passed strangely in the healing chamber. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness as the medical technology worked on his body. Sometimes he woke to find nurses checking on him. Sometimes he woke to find himself alone. Except for Kraz Thor in the next chamber. On the second day, he woke to find the Varath warrior looking at him. Kraz Thor's golden eyes were alert now, studying Jake with that same intensity from the arena. "You are awake," Kraz Thor said. His voice was rough, damaged from Jake's strike to his throat, but the translator made it understandable. "So are you," Jake replied. His own voice was not much better. They looked at each other in silence for a long moment. 2 warriors who had tried to kill each other, now healing side by side. "Why did you not tell me about your family before the fight?" Kraz Thor asked finally. "Your loss. Your reason for being there. If I had known, perhaps things would have been different." Jake considered the question. "Would it have changed anything? Would you have fought differently?" "No," Kraz Thor admitted. "The rules of the arena are absolute. But I would have understood your purpose better. I would have known I was not fighting a man seeking glory, but a father seeking justice for his children." "Would that have mattered?" Jake asked. Kraz Thor was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said finally. "It matters greatly. Among my people, family bonds are sacred. To lose your offspring is the greatest pain a warrior can endure. I did not know humans felt this so deeply." "We feel it," Jake said quietly. "We feel it, just as much as any species in the galaxy." Over the following days, they talked. At first, the conversations were brief, just a few words exchanged between healing sessions. But gradually, they grew longer and deeper. Kraz Thor explained that he was not just an arena fighter, but a high-ranking commander in the Varath military. He participated in arena combat to maintain his status and honor within the warrior culture of his people. "The attack on Epsilon Prime," Kraz Thor said on the 3rd day, "was ordered by the High Command against my recommendation. I told them it was strategically foolish. Your colony was not a military threat. Attacking it would only create hatred between our peoples and make eventual peace impossible." "Then why did they do it?" Jake asked. "Because there are factions within my government who do not want peace," Kraz Thor explained. They believe the Vareth Empire should expand by force. They see diplomacy as weakness. War Master Dreknar leads this faction, and he has been gaining power in the high command. Jake felt anger rising but forced it down. You knew this was wrong, but you followed orders anyway. Yes, Krasthor did not make excuses. I am a soldier. Our culture demands obedience to the chain of command. This is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. But seeing you fight, seeing what your loss has driven you to do, has made me question whether obedience is always the right path. Jake turned this over in his mind. The situation was more complicated than simple good and evil. The Varoth were not all monsters. Just as humans were not all innocent, there were political currents at work. Factions with different goals. Individuals struggling to do what they thought was right within their own cultural frameworks. On the fourth day, Lieutenant Amy Phillips came to visit. She had to get special clearance to enter the medical facility, and she brought 2 guards with her. She stopped short when she saw Jake in a chamber next to Krasthor. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "I am glad to see you alive. The entire crew has been worried." "Good to see you too, Amy," Jake said. He noticed her looking at Krasthor with barely concealed hostility. "We have been talking. It is not what you think." Amy's expression was carefully neutral. But Jake knew her well enough to read the concern underneath. "Sir," with respect. Fraternizing with the enemy could be seen as inappropriate. Earth Command is already asking questions about the arena match. The political fallout has been significant. "The enemy," Krasthor said from his chamber, his rough voice drawing Amy's attention. "An interesting word. Tell me, Lieutenant, do you believe all Vareth are your enemies? Or just those who make decisions you disagree with?" Amy's hand moved closer to her sidearm. "I believe that anyone who attacks human civilians is my enemy. Your empire killed 2,000 innocent people." "You are correct," Krasthor said, surprising her. "And this action was dishonorable. Not all of my people supported this decision. Some of us argued against it, but we were overruled by those who see humans as weak and unworthy of respect." He paused, then continued. "Your commander has shown me otherwise." He stood in the arena, knowing he would likely die, all to make the galaxy pay attention to an injustice. That is not weakness. That is strength of the highest order. Amy looked between Jake and Krasthor, confusion clear on her face. "What exactly has been happening here?" "Amy," Jake smiled slightly, despite the pain it caused. "A conversation, Amy. Just a conversation between 2 soldiers who are tired of following orders that do not make sense." Over the next 2 days, more visitors came. Some were officials from the Galactic Council, wanting to understand the implications of the arena draw. Some were reporters, seeking interviews. Some were military personnel from various species, curious about the human who had achieved what no one else could. But the most important visitor came on the 6th day. Krasthor received a message on a secure channel, and his expression darkened as he read it. Jake noticed the change immediately. "Bad news?" he asked. Krasthor was silent for a moment, then made a decision. "I am going to tell you something that could be considered treason against my empire. But I believe you need to know this." He manipulated the controls of his chamber, bringing up a holographic display that only the 2 of them could see. Data scrolled across the screen, messages, and reports in the Vareth language. "I have sources within the High Command who share my concerns about the current direction of our empire. They have been sending me information." Krasthor's voice was serious. The attack on Epsilon Prime was not an isolated incident. It was the first step in a larger plan by War Master Dreknar to provoke a full war between our peoples. Jake felt his heart rate increase, and the medical monitors beeped in response. "Why would he want that?" "Power," Krasthor said simply. "In times of war, military leaders gain more authority. Dreknar believes he can use a human-Vareth conflict to consolidate his control over the Empire. He is planning more attacks on human colonies, designed to look like legitimate military actions, but actually intended to create maximum outrage and force a military response. Jake stared at the data, his mind racing. This information needs to reach Earth Command and the Galactic Council. Yes, Krasthor agreed. But if I simply transmit it, Dreknar's faction will claim it is fabricated. They will say I have been corrupted by human influence. He looked at Jake directly. We need proof that will satisfy both our peoples, and we need to work together to stop what is coming. 3 weeks after the arena fight, Jake Morrison stood in a small conference room on a neutral trading station. His body had healed remarkably well, though his left arm still ached when he moved it certain ways. The advanced alien medical technology had done its job, but some pains took longer to fade than others. He was not alone. Lieutenant Amy Phillips stood beside him, along with 2 other officers from the EDF Horizon, Lieutenant Danny Carter and Commander Helen Ross. They all wore civilian clothes rather than uniforms, trying not to draw attention. On the other side of the room, Krasthor waited with 2 of his own people, Vareth warriors who served under his command. I still think this is insane, Amy muttered, keeping her voice low. If Earth Command finds out you are meeting secretly with Vareth military officers, there will be consequences. Then we better make sure it is worth the risk, Jake replied. The door opened, and a figure entered. She was Vareth, but smaller than Krasthor, with lighter green scales and keen intelligence in her eyes. Krasthor bowed his head slightly in respect. This is Commander Sayla. She serves in our intelligence division and has been investigating War Master Dreknar's activities for months. Sayla nodded to the humans. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I know this requires trust that our peoples do not yet share. But what I have discovered is too important to let politics stand in the way. She activated a holographic display in the center of the room. Images and data appeared. Documents in both Varath and standard languages. War Master Dreknar has been planning a series of attacks on human colonies for over a year. Epsilon Prime was only the beginning. He has convinced enough members of the High Command that humans represent a growing threat to the Empire. A threat? Danny Carter spoke up, his voice angry. We have barely expanded beyond our own sector. We have been peaceful in our dealings with other species. How are we a threat? You are not, Sayla said bluntly. But Dreknar does not care about truth. He cares about power. He has been manipulating intelligence reports, exaggerating human military capabilities, and creating false evidence of human aggression. He wants a war because during wartime, military commanders have almost unlimited authority. Krasthor added. Once war is declared, the civilian government of the Vareth Empire steps aside. All decisions are made by the War Council, which Dreknar effectively controls. He will use the war to eliminate his political opponents and establish himself as the supreme military leader. Jake studied the data carefully. What other colonies are targeted? Sayla manipulated the display, and several star systems lit up in red. New Boston, Harmony Station, the agricultural world of Greenfield. All of them are lightly defended civilian populations. Easy targets that will create maximum outrage when destroyed. Helen Ross leaned forward. When is the next attack scheduled? Within 2 months, Sayla said. Perhaps sooner. If Dreknar feels threatened. He knows there are some of us who oppose him. He is moving faster than planned. Amy shook her head. Even with this evidence, what can we do? If we bring this to the Galactic Council, both our governments will deny it. Dreknar will claim it is fabricated. Earth Command will not trust anything coming from Vareth sources, which is why we need more than just documents, Krasthor said. We need direct evidence. We need to catch Dreknar in the act of planning these attacks, in a way that cannot be denied by either side. Jake understood what Krasthor was suggesting. You want to set a trap? Yes, Krasthor confirmed. Dreknar is planning to personally oversee the next attack on New Boston. He wants to ensure it is executed perfectly. If we can be there, if we can record him giving the orders to attack a civilian colony, It will be proof that even the most hardline politicians cannot ignore. That is incredibly dangerous, Helen said. New Boston has 30,000 people. If we fail, they all die. Sayla nodded. We are aware of the risk. But if we do nothing, New Boston dies anyway, along with all the other colonies on Dreknar's list. And then our peoples go to war, and millions die over years of conflict. This may be our only chance to prevent that. Jake thought of Lisa and Emma. He thought of all the families on New Boston, who had no idea they were targeted for destruction. He thought of all the young soldiers on both sides who would die in a war that should never happen. What do you need from us? He asked. Over the next hour, they developed a plan. It was risky and required perfect timing. Sayla would continue feeding information to Kraz-Thor about Dreknar's movements. Kraz-Thor would use his status as a war hero to get himself assigned to the attack fleet heading to New Boston, claiming he wanted to personally lead the assault to avenge his defeat in the arena. Jake and a small team from the EDF Horizon would secretly arrive at New Boston first and coordinate the evacuation of as many civilians as possible. They would not have time to evacuate everyone, but they could save thousands if they worked quickly and quietly. When Dreknar arrived with his fleet, Kraz-Thor would record everything: the orders to attack, the deliberate targeting of civilian areas, the War Master's own words, explaining his true motivations. Then, before the attack could begin, Kraz-Thor would transmit all the evidence simultaneously to Earth Command, the Verath civilian government, and the Galactic Council. It is not perfect, Amy admitted. There are 100 ways this could go wrong. But it is better than doing nothing, Jake said. He looked at Kraz-Thor. You realize, if this works, you will be branded a traitor by part of your own people. Dreknar's supporters will want you executed. Kraz-Thor's golden eyes met Jake's without hesitation. I would rather be an honorable traitor than a loyal servant to dishonor. My people have lost their way. If exposing this conspiracy helps us find the path again, then the personal cost is acceptable. Sayla spoke quietly. Many in the Verath Empire are tired of endless war. Many remember when we were respected for our honor and strength, not feared for our cruelty. But they are afraid to speak out. If we succeed, we give them the courage to demand change. Jake extended his hand to Kraz-Thor, a human gesture of agreement and trust. The massive Verath warrior looked at the offered hand for a moment, then gripped it carefully. His hand was so large it completely engulfed Jake's. But his grip was gentle, respectful, strange, Kraz-Thor said with what might have been a smile. 3 weeks ago, we tried to kill each other. Now we are allies. Life is full of surprises, Jake replied. They spent 2 more hours going over the details of the plan. Communication protocols, timing, backup plans if something went wrong. By the time they finished, everyone understood their roles. As they prepared to leave, going their separate ways to avoid suspicion, Sayla approached Jake privately. I wanted to thank you, she said, for your willingness to trust us despite what happened to your family. Many would not be capable of such trust. But, former willingness, many would not be capable of such trust. Jake was quiet for a moment. I am not doing this out of trust, he said honestly. I am doing it because it is the right thing to do. Because more people will die if we do nothing. Trust comes later, if we survive this. Sayla nodded, understanding. That is fair. But I want you to know that not all Verath supported the attack on Epsilon Prime. Many of us were horrified. We are not all like Dreknar. I know that now, Jake said. Kraz-Thor helped me understand that your people are as diverse as mine. You have heroes and villains, just like every species. Judging all Verath by Dreknar's actions would be as wrong as judging all humans by our worst examples. Over the next weeks, the plan was set in motion. Jake returned to the EDF Horizon and quietly briefed his senior officers. Some were supportive. Others were deeply suspicious of working with the Verath. But Jake's reputation and the strength of the evidence Sela provided convinced enough of them to move forward. Evacuation plans for New Boston were developed under the cover of routine emergency preparedness drills. Civilian authorities were told there was a potential threat, but not given the full details. Panic would doom the operation. Meanwhile, Thor worked within the Verath military structure. His request to lead the attack on New Boston was approved. Dreknar himself sent a message congratulating Thor on his desire to restore honor after the embarrassment in the arena. The War Master had no idea he was welcoming his greatest threat into his own operation. A week before the scheduled attack, Jake received a coded message from Thor. 3 words in standard. Everything is ready. Jake stood on the bridge of the EDF horizon, looking out at the stars. Amy joined him, and they stood in silence for a moment. Are you sure about this? Amy asked. Once we start, there is no turning back. Jake thought about his daughter Emma, about her bright smile and endless questions. He thought about Lisa, about the life they had planned together. He thought about all the families on New Boston who deserved the chance to see tomorrow. The colony of New Boston sat on the edge of human-controlled space, a growing settlement of 30,000 people who had come here looking for new opportunities. They had built farms, schools, research facilities, and homes. They had built a life. Now, without knowing it, they were about to become the center of a conspiracy that could change the entire galaxy. Jake Morrison stood in the command center of New Boston's small defense station. Lieutenant Amy Phillips worked beside him, coordinating with the civilian authorities. They had 48 hours before the Verath fleet arrived. 48 hours to evacuate as many people as possible, without causing panic. Governor Paul Henderson, a gray-haired man who had led New Boston since its founding, looked at the evacuation plans with confusion. Commander Morrison, I appreciate Earth Defense taking emergency preparedness seriously, but this seems excessive. You are asking us to evacuate nearly half the population to the outer settlements. The disruption to daily life will be significant. Jake wanted to tell him the truth, but they had agreed that too much information would cause panic. Governor, please trust me when I say this is necessary. We have intelligence suggesting a possible threat to the colony. I would rather disrupt daily life than have to explain to families why we did not take precautions. The governor studied Jake's face and seemed to see something there that convinced him. Very well, Commander. We will begin the evacuation immediately, but I am holding you responsible if this turns out to be a false alarm. I accept that responsibility, Jake said. Over the next 2 days, transport ships moved thousands of people to smaller settlements, scattered across New Boston's 3 moons and orbital stations. Medical facilities set up temporary locations in hardened bunkers. Children were told it was an adventure, a chance to see other parts of the colony system. Most adults suspected something serious was happening but trusted their leaders to protect them. Jake barely slept during this time. Every hour, he received updates from Thor through encrypted channels. The Verath fleet was on schedule. War Master Dreknar was personally commanding from his flagship. Everything was proceeding exactly as Sela's intelligence had predicted. On the morning of the 3rd day, the Verath fleet arrived at the edge of the system. Jake watched on the long-range sensors as 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They were massive vessels, each one capable of destroying a planet's surface defenses. They are holding position at the system's edge, Amy reported. No aggressive actions yet. They are scanning the colony. Jake's communicator beeped with Thor's encrypted signal. He moved to a private room to take the call. The Verath warrior's face appeared on the screen, his expression serious. We are in position, Thor said. Dreknar is preparing for a command briefing in 1 hour. That is when he will give the final attack orders. I have recording equipment ready. Are your people clear of the primary targets? Most of them, Jake confirmed. We could not evacuate everyone without raising suspicion, but the critical areas are empty. Government buildings, the main spaceport, power stations. If the attack happens, casualties should be minimal. Good. Krasthor paused. Jake, you should know that Dreknar brought more ships than planned. He is suspicious of something. If this goes wrong, if he discovers what we are doing before I can transmit the evidence, he may attack immediately. Jake felt his stomach tighten. Can you still get the recording? Yes. But extraction afterward may be difficult. Dreknar's personal guards are loyal only to him. Once I transmit the evidence, they will try to stop me. Krasthor's golden eyes met Jake's through the screen. If I do not survive this, make sure the evidence reaches everyone. Make sure both our peoples know the truth. You will survive, Jake said firmly. Krasthor's expression softened slightly. It has been an honor working with you, Commander Morrison. You have shown me that different species can find common ground, even through grief and conflict. Whatever happens today, remember that. The call ended, and Jake returned to the command center. Amy looked at him questioningly. It is time, Jake said simply. Aboard the Varath flagship, Krasthor made his way to the command briefing room. He wore his full military honors, decorations from dozens of campaigns covering his uniform. Other officers nodded respectfully as he passed. None of them knew what he was about to do. War Master Dreknar stood at the center of the briefing room, a massive Varath with dark scales and cold eyes. He was older than Krasthor, a veteran of countless wars, and his reputation was built on ruthlessness rather than honor. Warriors of the Empire, Dreknar began as the room filled with senior officers. Today, we strike another blow against the human threat. New Boston is a strategic target, despite what their propaganda claims. Our intelligence shows they are developing advanced weapons in secret research facilities hidden among the civilian population. Krasthor knew this was a lie. Sayla's intelligence had proven there were no weapon facilities on New Boston. But he remained silent, his recording equipment capturing every word. Dreknar continued, warming to his subject. The humans believe they can hide behind civilian shields. They believe their weakness and sentiment will protect them. Today we show them that the Varath Empire does not recognize such cowardice. We will destroy their research facilities, their spaceports, their government centers. We will make this colony an example. One of the younger officers raised a hand. War Master, what about civilian casualties? The Galactic Council may object if the death toll is too high. Dreknar's laugh was cold. The Galactic Council is weak. They will protest for a few days and then forget about it. Besides, civilian casualties will only strengthen our position. The humans will become enraged, they will demand military action, and when they attack us in response, we will have justification for a full invasion of their space. Another officer spoke up. Is that the goal, War Master? Full war with humanity? Of course, Dreknar said, his voice full of confidence. I have been planning this for years. The humans are weak, scattered across only a few dozen worlds. A proper military campaign would crush them within months. And in wartime, military authority supersedes all civilian oversight. The War Council would have complete control over the Empire. Krasthor felt disgust rising in his throat. Dreknar was not even trying to hide his true intentions from his officers. He believed they were all loyal, all willing to follow him into a war of conquest. What about you, Commander Krasthor? Dreknar turned to face him directly. You have been quiet. This was the moment. Krasthor could feel the weight of his decision like a physical presence. Once he spoke, there would be no going back. Yes, War Master, I have concerns, Krasthor said clearly. My concern is that you are a traitor to everything the Varath Empire should stand for. You are manipulating intelligence, lying to the High Command, and planning to murder thousands of civilians to start a war that serves only your own ambition for power. The room went completely silent. Officers stared at Krasthor in shock. Dreknar's face twisted with rage. What did you say? The War Master's voice was dangerously quiet. Krasthor touched a control on his wrist device. I said you are a traitor. And I have been recording this entire briefing. Your own words, admitting that New Boston has no weapon facilities. Your admission that you plan to provoke a war for personal gain. Your complete disregard for honor and the warrior code. He pressed another button, and the transmission began. The recording of Dreknar's briefing, complete with his admissions and plans, was simultaneously sent to Earth Defense Command, the Vareth civilian government, and the Galactic Council headquarters. Copies were also sent to major news organizations across a dozen species. Within minutes, everyone in the galaxy will know what you have done, Krozthor said. Your conspiracy is finished. Krozthor said. Is you not? My nesting. Dreknar roared in fury and reached for his weapon. His personal guards moved to surround Krozthor. But other officers in the room hesitated. Some looked at Krozthor with respect. Others looked at Dreknar with horror, realizing they had been following a leader who had betrayed the Empire's values. On New Boston, Jake watched as the transmission came through. He immediately forwarded it to every communication channel available. Within seconds, the recording was spreading across the galaxy. It worked, Amy said, her voice filled with relief. The evidence is out. Everyone can see what Dreknar was planning, but Jake was watching the Vareth fleet on sensors. They are moving. Ships breaking formation. Something is happening up there. Aboard the flagship, chaos had erupted. Dreknar's guards were fighting with officers who had turned against the War Master. Krozthor was holding his own against 3 opponents, his combat skills from the arena serving him well even in the confined space. Then Sayla's voice came through on Krozthor's secure channel. Krozthor, 5 ships have broken formation and are retreating. Their captains have declared loyalty to the civilian government and rejected Dreknar's authority. You have support. Krozthor threw off his attackers and ran for the door. He needed to reach an escape pod before Dreknar could kill him. Behind him, he could hear the War Master screaming orders, demanding that his loyal forces capture the traitor. He made it to the pod bay and launched himself toward New Boston. As his pod accelerated away from the flagship, he saw the Vareth fleet beginning to tear itself apart, ship turning against ship as captains chose sides. The conspiracy had not just been exposed, it had split the Vareth military right down the middle. Jake watched as an escape pod headed toward New Boston. That is Krozthor's signature. Prepare to recover him. The EDF Horizon moved to intercept the pod, bringing the Vareth warrior aboard. Minutes later, Krozthor stood on the bridge of a human warship, battered but alive. Jake gripped his shoulder in a gesture of friendship and relief. You did it, Jake said. The galaxy knows the truth. Krozthor looked at the view screen, watching his people's ships fighting each other. This is just the beginning. My empire is at a crossroads now. Some will support the old ways, Dreknar's ways of conquest and cruelty. Others will fight for the return to honor and the warrior code. It may take years to resolve. But at least now the fight is in the open, Amy said. No more secret conspiracies. No more innocent colonies destroyed. Over the following hours, the situation stabilized. More Vareth ships declared against Dreknar. The War Master's flagship, surrounded by ships loyal to the civilian government, was forced to surrender. Dreknar himself was arrested by his own people, charged with treason and conspiracy to start an illegal war. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session and officially condemned the attack plans. They ordered a full investigation into Vareth military operations. The civilian government of the Vareth Empire, freed from Dreknar's manipulation, immediately opened diplomatic channels with Earth. On New Boston, the evacuation was reversed. Families returned to their homes, grateful that the threat had passed. Governor Henderson publicly thanked Commander Morrison and the EDF for their quick action, though he still did not know the full extent of how close they had come to disaster. A week later, Jake stood in the observation deck of the EDF Horizon, with Krozthor beside him. They looked out at the stars together. 2 warriors from different worlds, who had changed the course of galactic history. What will you do now? Jake asked. Your military career is probably over. Thor considered this. Perhaps that is for the best. My people need leaders who can think beyond war. I may serve better in a diplomatic role, helping to rebuild trust between our species, and preventing future Dreknars from gaining power, Jake added. Yes. Thor turned to look at Jake. What about you? You came to the arena seeking death because you had lost everything. But you found purpose instead. Where does that purpose lead you now? Jake thought about Lisa and Emma. The pain of their loss was still there and probably always would be. But it no longer consumed him. I think it leads me to making sure other families do not suffer what mine did, to building bridges instead of burning them, to showing that different species can work together, even after terrible things happen. Thor nodded slowly. Your mate and offspring would be proud of what you have accomplished. You honored their memory not through revenge but through creating something better. They stood in silence for a while, comfortable in each other's presence. Two former enemies, who had become allies, then friends. They had faced death together in the arena, and then faced conspiracy and war together in the stars. Their unlikely partnership had saved thousands of lives and changed the relationship between their peoples. The galaxy's fiercest warrior had faced a human with a death wish, and neither had won their fight. Instead, they had both found something more valuable than victory. They had found hope, purpose, and proof that even the deepest wounds could be healed if people were willing to try. In the end, that was the real victory. Not the draw in the arena, not even stopping Dreknar's conspiracy. The real victory was showing the galaxy that peace was possible, that understanding could bridge the widest gulfs, and that honor could be found in the most unexpected places. Jake Morrison had entered that arena wanting to die. He walked away from it wanting to live, to build, to create a future where his family's sacrifice meant something. And with Thor at his side, he would do exactly that. I am sure, he said. This is what Lisa would have wanted. Not revenge, but justice. Not hatred, but hope for something better. He turned to face his crew. Set course for New Boston. Maximum speed. And send a message to Thor. Tell him the humans are in position. Tell him we are ready to change the galaxy. The EDF Horizon's engines came to life, and the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. Behind them, in another part of space, a Verath fleet prepared for what they thought would be a simple attack on a defenseless human colony. They had no idea that two warriors, once enemies, were about to expose the truth and offer both their peoples a chance for a different future. A future where honor mattered more than conquest, where justice mattered more than revenge, where enemies could become allies in the fight against a greater evil. The galaxy was about to learn that humans and Verath working together were far more powerful than anyone had imagined. Jake understood what Thor was proposing. An alliance. The human who had lost everything to the Verath, and the Verath warrior who believed his empire had lost its honor, working together against a common threat. It was crazy. It would be seen as treason by some on both sides. But it might also be the only way to prevent thousands more deaths. Tell me what you have in mind, Jake said. Then darkness claimed them both, and neither warrior moved. The arena fell into shocked silence as medical drones rushed onto the field. For the first time in the arena's long history, both fighters had collapsed at the same time. Neither could continue. According to the ancient rules, the match was a draw. Nobody had won. Nobody had lost. Both had proven their worth. Both had earned respect. But more importantly, both had learned something about the other. The galaxy had watched a human stand against their fiercest warrior and refuse to fall. And they had watched that warrior show respect to an opponent, something he had never done before. Whatever came next would be different because of this day. Jake Morrison had succeeded in making the galaxy pay attention. Now he just needed to survive long enough to see what that meant. Thor touched the wound, his blood dark against his scales. Then he looked at Jake with new understanding. You do not fight like the others. You do not rely on strength or natural weapons. You think. You plan. You fight like a Verath would fight. He moved forward again. But now there was something different in his approach. This was no longer an execution. This was a real fight. Jake knew he could not last much longer. His body was failing. But he had accomplished something. He had shown that humans could fight against the galaxy's best. He had made them bleed. Whatever happened next, he had already won something important. A bell rang, echoing through the corridors. It was time. Jake stood up, checked his equipment one last time, and walked toward the door that would lead him into the arena. He could hear the crowd getting louder, chanting in dozens of different languages. Soon, they would be chanting for blood. He thought of Lisa one more time, remembering her smile. He thought of Emma, remembering her laugh. Then, he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on what was ahead. The door opened, and light flooded in. Jake Morrison stepped forward to face his death.